The janitor's shirt itched, not just from the cheap fabric, but from the weight of a lie stitched into every thread. It had cost $24.99 and came with a fake name tag that read simply, Cam. But the man pushing the mop across the floor of cafe number 14 was anything but simple. His name was Cameron Ellis, CEO of Brew and Branch, the man behind 37 thriving locations and one of the most recognizable boutique coffee chains in the region. And yet, here he was, scrubbing soda syrup off cracked tile while customers buzzed past him with to-go lattes and tired eyes. Most of them didn't even notice him. That was the point. He couldn't remember the last time he'd worn anything under $100. Couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to him without filtering their words through the lens of power. He'd built Brew and Branch from a single kiosk downtown, mortgaging his condo when the banks laughed at him. His motto back then? Every cup poured with purpose. It was more than marketing. It was who he was. But now, the numbers looked fine. Too fine. Almost perfect. Sales were up, margins were healthy, and yet the corporate reviews for one location had become a red flag he couldn't ignore. Cafe Sakuyura 14 was hemorrhaging staff. Complaints flooded in anonymously. Missing hours, mistreated employees, management. Playing favorites. His executive team had laughed it off. Millennials, am I right? They joked. They want a paycheck and a parade. Everyone laughed, except Cameron. He hadn't slept in 3 nights, not since he started reading the review comments that didn't make it into official reports. And when the same name, Brad, kept showing up, paired with phrases like hostile environment and disrespected boundaries, Cameron stopped trusting what the spreadsheets were telling him. That's when he put on the janitor's shirt. That's when Cam was born. Brad Wilcox, the cafe's location manager, didn't suspect a thing. To him, Cam was just another faceless body pushing a mop. Clean up in the men's room, some kid got creative with the soap, Brad had muttered yesterday, not even bothering to look up from his phone. The irony was almost poetic. Cameron, being ordered to clean vomit by the very man he suspected of poisoning the culture he'd worked 12 years to create. But what caught Cameron's attention wasn't Brad. Not really. It was her. Noel Chin, late 20s, composed, precise. While the others gossiped between shifts or tapped on their phones, Noel worked with quiet purpose, memorizing regulars' orders, de-escalating tense customers with a single warm smile, staying late when no one else bothered. She wasn't loud, but she was present, and something about her didn't fit. She wasn't playing the same game as everyone else. The first night, he thought it was coincidence that she stayed behind after her shift. The second night, he saw a pattern. She wiped counters no one else touched, double-checked machines, and then, most curious of all, slipped into the back office alone. She didn't steal. He watched her unlock a drawer, pull out a file, tuck something carefully into an envelope from her own bag. Her movements were slow, deliberate, almost reverent. Cameron didn't know what she was doing. But he knew one thing. This wasn't about money. It wasn't even about power. This was about something deeper, something sacred. As she whispered goodnight and walked out into the night with that envelope in her hand, he stared at the drawer she left behind. What? Was she hiding? No. What was she protecting? Tomorrow he would find out. Not as Cameron Ellis, CEO of Brew and Branch, but as Cam, the invisible janitor nobody noticed, and the only man they didn't bother to lie to. And for the first time in years, he felt alive. Not for growth, not for profit, but for something he'd almost forgotten existed. Justice. The morning rush at Cafe 14 hit like a freight train of caffeine-starved chaos. Lines spilled out the door. Steam hissed from machines like angry serpents. And amid the swirl of orders, laughter, and short fuses, Cameron Ellis, aka Cam, moved, silently with a mop in one hand and eyes wide open. He'd chosen the early shift on purpose. Morning brought the most stress, and stress cracked facades. People didn't hide as well when they were overwhelmed. That's when the truth slipped out. He slipped through the crowd unnoticed, dumping trash, wiping down counters, clearing table 7 after someone spilled oat milk all over the floor. A tall, skinny barista named Tyler flashed him a quick smile as he handed off a drink. "Thanks, man. You're actually doing the job. Last janitor spent more time watching TikToks in the stockroom." Cameron nodded. "Been here long?" "Almost a year," Tyler replied, not missing a beat while steaming milk. "Not bad. Tips are decent. Everyone kind of looks out for each other. Except..." He paused, glancing toward the front. "Well, unless you cross the king." Cameron followed his line of sight. Brad, polished as always, smirking like he owned the floor. And in a way he did. The staff orbited him like anxious moons, their schedules, breaks, and hours tethered to his whims. Tyler leaned in slightly, dropping his voice. "You know, there's a fan club." Cameron tilted his head. "You mean those baristas he flirts with?" Tyler grinned without humor. "Best shifts, longest breaks, magically never on closing duty." "And her?" Cameron motioned discreetly toward Noel, who was restocking the pastry case with machine-like precision. Her movements were rhythmic, almost meditative. She didn't just do the job. She owned it quietly. Something flickered across Tyler's face. Respect, maybe. She's different. Knows every regular by name. Never misses a beat. Doesn't say much, but she's always there. Like the cafe's guardian. Angel or something. Guardian angel? Tyler shrugged. Fixes stuff nobody asks her to. Covers shifts. Trains new hires even though Brad's supposed to. Makes sure people get their breaks. That kind of thing. Cameron noted every word, every glance. The dynamic was clear. Brad wore the crown, but Noel held the soul of the cafe. Later that afternoon, Cameron lingered near the back, pretending to organize a cleaning shelf while listening. Jenna, another barista, was talking just a bit too loudly while refilling sugar caddies. "She acts like she owns the place," she muttered, glancing at Noel. "Always watching. Creepy, if you ask me." But the staff's tone shifted again. When Cameron found himself near Marco, the weekend shift led, restocking supplies in the back. "Noel," Marco said when prompted. "She's solid. Saved my ass during that snowstorm. Brad tried to write me up for being late. She pulled the footage, showed I was outside shoveling the walkway for 20 minutes before open. Told him to back off." Piece by piece, Cameron built the picture. The others might have overlooked it, but to him it was a new kind of data, leadership, in its rawest form. Not given, earned. By closing time, his back ached from mopping and hauling garbage. Still, he wasn't ready to leave. "Need help?" he offered Noel, who was counting down the register. She looked up, surprised. "You're still here?" He smiled. "You've been here since open?" "Double shift," she said with a tired grin. "Something like that. You can head out if you're done," she added. "Almost," he lied, wanting to stay. He pretended to busy himself, but his attention was locked on the hallway leading to the back office. When he heard her footsteps, he moved. Silent, purposeful. He watched from the shadows. Noel approached the filing cabinet. The same drawer, the same careful key. This time, Cameron saw more clearly. She reached into her bag, pulled out cash. Small bills. Ones, fives. He recognized the daisy-painted tip jar from her station. She was giving away her own money. Again, to the same drawer. She sealed an envelope and wrote something on the front. Then locked the drawer again and checked her watch before hurrying out. Once she was gone, Cameron moved quickly. Locked. As expected. But he wasn't just a CEO, he was a founder. He'd done surprise audits, cracked open safes. He bent a paperclip into shape and popped the lock. Inside, order, precision. A neat stack of envelopes, each labeled in perfect handwriting. He didn't open any. He didn't need to. The most recent said, Elena M. Week 14th, Elena M. He whispered the name aloud like a puzzle piece he didn't recognize. He closed the drawer gently and relocked it. Then stood there, heart pounding. Something told him this wasn't charity. It was resistance. Quiet, fierce, and personal. The next morning, Cameron showed up early. Brad was already in the office, half-dressed in his apron, scrolling Facebook. "Trash cans need emptying," Brad muttered without looking. Cameron nodded, then waited for opportunity. It came 5 minutes later when Brad stepped out to take a phone call. The laptop screen was still unlocked. Cameron slid behind the desk and started digging. Employee records, staff logs, termination files. There she was, Elena Martinez, barista, shift lead, terminated 3 months ago. Reason? Cash mishandling. Cameron's jaw clenched. That should have triggered a corporate review. He would have seen the alert. But there was nothing. And more troubling, payroll showed no final check, no severance, no exit interview. She had vanished from the system. When Brad's footsteps returned, Cameron moved away from the screen. "Didn't I tell you to empty the trash?" Brad snapped. "On it," Cameron replied, mind spinning. Elena M. wasn't just some employee. She'd been erased. That night, Cameron sat in his rental car across the street. Laptop open, security system access running under executive. Override. He pulled footage from 3 months ago. 4:43 p.m. Elena at the register, Brad standing close, arms crossed, watching. No audio, but body language screamed accusation. Brad pointed. Elena gestured, confused, stressed. He fast-forwarded to the next day. Elena, tearful, carrying a box of personal items. "Cash mishandling," Cameron whispered. "But whose?" He dove into the sales logs. Found the day in question. $157.43 short, but 5 voided transactions popped like red flags. All during Brad's shift. All for large orders. Classic trick. Void the sale, pocket the cash, then blame someone else. He checked the HR complaint logs. Found something chilling. Elena had filed a formal complaint, alleging Brad manipulated schedules to deny certain staff enough hours to qualify for health care. The complaint never left his inbox. That's why she was fired. Not for stealing, for speaking up. But Noel? How did Noel know? Why was she collecting tip money like it was sacred? The next day, Cameron used his wealth the way most CEOs use legal teams. He had his private security run a quiet background check on Noel. Nothing suspicious, just an address. A modest apartment building 15 minutes from the cafe. That afternoon, after her shift, Cameron followed discreetly as Noel walked, not home, but to a grocery store. She emerged carrying 2 heavy bags, one hand clutching the daisy-painted tip jar tucked inside her purse. She kept walking, 6 blocks, an old apartment building with peeling paint and a sagging security door. She didn't go in. She knocked on the ground floor window, left the groceries and tip jar on the step, and walked away quickly. Moments later, the door creaked open. Elena Martinez stepped out. Cameron gasped. She looked thinner, tired, holding the hand of a small child peeking from behind her knees. Noel had been delivering groceries, delivering money, delivering dignity. Where the system failed, she'd created a lifeline. Cameron sat in his car for nearly an hour. He wasn't watching anymore. He was feeling the shame, the guilt, the hollow weight of realizing his company, the one he swore would be different, had let this happen. He'd built an empire on trust, and lost sight of the people holding it up. Back at Cafe Number 14 the next morning, Cameron saw it all with new eyes. Brad taking credit for a display Noel set up, the sarcastic jokes in front of customers, the way Noel kept her head down but never looked away. She was watching, documenting, building something. "Can I ask you something?" Cameron murmured while pretending to mop near her. She glanced up. "Sure, Cam. How long have you worked here?" 3 years. Started at the downtown store. Transferred here 8 months ago. Cameron froze. That was right after Elena's firing. Like it here? She hesitated. It has its moments. Heard someone got fired. For stealing. Noel paused, then said carefully, "Where'd you hear that?" Jenna mentioned someone. Elena. Her eyes darkened. Elena didn't steal. She was the most honest person here. Before he could press further, Brad's voice cut through the air. "Noel. Office. Now." Cameron followed behind, discreetly, pretending to check trash bins. Listening. Brad's voice dropped into a venomous hiss. "Keep asking about Elena, and your hours might vanish too. Understand?" Noel emerged composed, but her hands trembled. Cameron met her eyes. For a brief second, her mask slipped. Behind it, pure fire. "No," she said simply. "But it will. Be." The drawer wasn't just holding money, it was building a case, and tomorrow Cameron Ellis would no longer just be watching, he would be ready to act. Cameron had always trusted numbers, graphs, data sets, forecasts. They never lied, until now. He sat hunched in his rental car across from Cafe No. 14, laptop open, fingers moving with surgeon-like precision. What he was about to do he'd never done before, not without a paper trail, legal oversight, or board approval. But the rules had failed someone. Someone named Elena. With executive override, he accessed the company's internal security archives. He scrolled back 3 months, the date of Elena Martinez's termination. The footage loaded. 7:43 p.m. Cameron leaned forward as the timestamp blinked. Elena appeared behind the register, petite, focused, her long dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. Beside her stood Brad Wilcox, arms folded, leaning just a little too close. Even without sound, the tension was unmistakable. Elena opened the till. Brad said something. She shook her head, looked confused. He pointed, agitated. She gestured back, defensive. He grabbed the cash drawer, slammed it shut, motioned toward the office. The footage jumped ahead. Next day, Elena arrived. No uniform. Just a hoodie, eyes red. She was escorted into the back, then re-emerged 20 minutes later, clutching a cardboard box. Cameron paused the frame. Her face, stunned, humiliated, scared. He sat back in the driver's seat, jaw tight. Something inside him shifted. The system said she was terminated for cash mishandling. But there had been no due process, no HR report, no oversight, just Brad, a closed office, and a disappeared barista. He dove deeper. Sales logs, voided transactions. The day in question had a 157.43 discrepancy, but Brad had processed 5 voids, each during peak hours, all large orders. Cameron recognized the play. It was an old scam. Take the order, pocket the cash, void the receipt, blame the gap on someone else. Elena hadn't made a mistake. She'd walked into a trap. Then he found it, buried in the HR complaint log, dated 1 week before her termination. Filed by Elena. Martinez. Subject, schedule manipulation and retaliation. She had reported Brad for cutting hours of specific employees, keeping them just below the threshold for benefits. She even attached screenshots from the scheduling software. The complaint should have gone directly to HR, but its submitted by field showed something damning. Saved as draft. Not sent. Cameron stared at the screen. Brad had intercepted it. And corporate never saw a thing. The silence in the car was deafening. Elena didn't just lose a job. She lost justice. And someone covered it up. But there was still one question burning in his mind. Why was Noel still fighting for her? Why risk so much for someone already gone? He pulled out the background report on Noel. She'd transferred to Cafe No. 14 8 months ago, right after Elena's dismissal. Lived alone in a modest apartment building, no red flags, never late, not a single disciplinary note. Quiet, dependable, invisible leadership. He stared at the address, then started the engine. He parked a block away, uncomfortable with his own steps, but knowing it was necessary. At 3:42 p.m., right on time, Noel exited the cafe. Her daisy-painted tip jar was tucked inside her bag. She didn't head home. Instead, she walked 6 blocks to a small grocery store and emerged 20 minutes later with 2 heavy paper bags. Noel moved with purpose, head down, avoiding attention. Cameron followed at a distance. She arrived at an aging apartment complex. Fading paint, rusted stair railings, the kind of place you only end up in when the world stops giving second chances. Noel didn't go inside. She gently set the grocery, bags by a ground floor window, tapped on the glass, then turned and walked away quickly, her steps fast and full of practiced urgency. A moment later, the front door opened. Elena stepped out. Cameron's breath caught in his throat. She looked different. Thinner, pale, eyes sunken, clothes worn. She scanned the street before picking up the groceries. Behind her, a small boy peeked through the cracked doorway, maybe 5 or 6, holding a plastic dinosaur. Elena reached back, placed a hand on his head, and gently closed the door. Cameron felt like the air had been punched from his lungs. This wasn't just a wrongful termination, this was survival. Elena wasn't a disgruntled employee. She was a mother, cast aside, struggling to keep food on the table. And Noel had been feeding her with tips. Quiet, constant acts of defiance. Groceries, envelopes, sacrifice. All because Cameron had built a system where someone like Brad could thrive, and someone like Elena could disappear. He didn't drive away for a long time. Just sat there watching the light change, the shadows stretch across the pavement. His mind replayed board meetings, shareholder reports, every time he'd congratulated his team on efficiency, while ignoring the red flags buried in the comment sections. The next morning he returned to Cafe Near 14, the janitor uniform pressed and folded, the mop in his hands. But now, his eyes saw everything. Brad making snide comments when Noel wasn't looking. A new barista flinching when Brad corrected her in front of customers. Noel, quietly covering mistakes, offering coaching, keeping things afloat while taking all the hits. At one point, she reached for inventory only to find her supplies missing. Again, Brad didn't say a word, just smirked and sipped his cold brew. It was deliberate, repetitive, a slow grind of micro-abuse designed to wear someone down without leaving evidence. But Noel didn't break. She wrote quietly, documenting in a small notebook tucked in her apron. Later that afternoon, during a lull in customers, Cameron found her wiping down the espresso machine. "You ever think about quitting?" he asked, soft enough that only she could hear. She didn't look up. "Sometimes. But I've got things I still need to finish." He didn't ask more, but he watched. That evening, as they closed, Brad cornered her by the time clock. Cameron pretended to mop nearby, listening. "I know what you're doing," Brad hissed. "The visits to Elena, the little notes in your locker. You think I don't see you building a case?" Noel said nothing, just stared back. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're just a barista who makes cute lattes." Noel's hands didn't even flinch. "I followed the maintenance schedule," she said flatly when Brad blamed her again for the espresso machine going down. "Well, clearly you didn't," he snapped, storming off. She stood there, steady, not angry. "Ready?" Later, in the supply closet, Cameron pulled her aside. "I can fix the machine," he whispered. "It's sabotage. Someone tampered with it." Her eyes narrowed. "Why would you help me?" He paused, then said the only thing that felt true. "Because Brad's not coming after you for coffee." Moment passed between them. No words, just understanding. 10 minutes later, the machine was working again. Brad's face turned to stone. "And Noel?" She poured a perfect shot, held it up with a slight shrug, and said, "Guess it reset." The staff exchanged looks. Lines were shifting, solidarity was forming, but Brad wasn't finished. The next day, Noel's locker was searched. Supplies lost. Her hours mysteriously slashed. Then her paycheck vanished. "Weird," Brad said with exaggerated innocence. "Must have been a payroll glitch." Cameron had seen enough. That night, from his phone, he authorized an emergency payroll override, deposited her missing wages. added a 15% processing bonus. The next morning, Brad was seething. Someone filed a payroll complaint, he snapped at Noel. You've been gunning for my job this whole time. Noel stood her ground. Calm, measured. I just asked where my check was. Brad's voice rose. You think I don't know what you're doing? You open that drawer, you're done. Cameron watched from the shadows as the cafe went silent. Everyone could feel it. Something was about to break. Noel stepped back. Steady. You framed Elena. You've been manipulating schedules. You stole from this cafe. And yes, I'm building a case because someone has to. Brad turned pale. You can't prove any of it. I can, Noel said, walking toward her locker. Cameron's heart pounded. She was going for the drawer. She was ready. Brad grabbed her arm. You open that drawer, you're fired. She yanked herself free. If I lose my job doing what's right, so be it. She stepped forward, and that's when Cameron moved. He stepped in front of her, gently, blocking her path. Cam, she whispered, confused, voice trembling. Please move. He looked at her, then reached into his pocket, pulled out his ID. Cameron Ellis, Chief Executive Officer. Noel stared at him in shock. I think, he said, quietly, it's time someone in power actually listened. The cafe was still dark when the employees arrived. The staff meeting mandatory sign had been taped to the front door in bold black ink. No one knew what it was about. Whispers flickered like sparks in the early morning gloom. Some feared more layoffs. Others hoped for something better, though they wouldn't dare say it aloud. Noel entered quietly, hair pulled back, apron folded over her arm. She scanned the room like she always did, reading energy, reading risk. What she didn't expect was to see him. Standing in front of the espresso bar, no mop in sight, was Cam. Only he wasn't in uniform anymore. Charcoal slacks, a crisp button-down shirt. The quiet posture of authority returned to his shoulders, but his expression was softer, less shielded. Brad arrived last, late, cup of coffee in hand. He froze mid-step when he saw Cameron. What the hell is this? He asked, fake grin already forming. Who's this? Oh wait, is this a joke? Cameron turned slowly, letting the room settle. Good morning, everyone, he said. My name is Cameron Ellis. I'm the CEO of Brew and Branch. Silence. Total, breathless silence. Jaws dropped. Someone in the back gasped. Tyler's mouth literally fell open. Jenna looked like she might faint. Noel didn't move, didn't blink, but her hand tightened around the strap of her apron. For the past 2 weeks, Cameron continued, I've been working alongside you as Cam, the janitor. It wasn't a marketing stunt. There were no hidden cameras. I came because reviews from this store raised red flags that didn't make it to my office, and now I know why. He let the silence settle. Brad stepped forward, trying to recover. Mr. Ellis, if I'd known, you would have created a better illusion, Cameron said, cutting him off. That's exactly why I didn't announce myself. Brad's smile faltered. The weight in the room shifted. I've watched everything. The favoritism, the retaliation, the toxic culture that's been allowed to fester under your leadership. Cameron looked directly at him. But more importantly, I've seen what someone else here has been doing quietly, with integrity. He motioned to Marcus, the district manager who stood nearby, already briefed. Marcus, Cameron said, the key. The staff murmured as Marcus stepped forward and handed Cameron a small silver key. He walked to the back office and gestured for the team to follow. Curious, cautious, they crowded inside, leaving a wide berth around Brad, whose face was now colorless. Cameron knelt beside the filing cabinet and inserted the key into the bottom drawer. A soft click echoed. He pulled the drawer open and lifted, out a thick, carefully organized folder. This, he said, is what integrity looks like. Inside were receipts, voided transactions matched against register logs, handwritten notes documenting conversations, screenshots of schedules showing reduced hours, statements from former staff, and then the stack of envelopes. He held one up. Noel has been using her own tip money to support a former employee who was wrongfully fired. He opened the latest envelope. Elena M. Week 14. Gasps again. Elena Martinez, Cameron said, was accused of theft. But as I've confirmed, she was framed by Brad for discovering he was manipulating transactions and employee schedules. Brad's voice cracked. You can't, this isn't. There's more, Cameron interrupted, holding up a final sheet. A letter, Elena's, written before she left but never sent. Fear had stopped her. A child to care for. No references, no allies. She detailed everything. How Brad voided transactions and pocketed the cash. How he rewrote her schedule. How he erased her complaint before HR could see it. The room was dead silent. Then Cameron turned to Brad, voice steady, cutting. Brad Wilcox, you are terminated effective immediately. Marcus will escort you to collect your personal belongings after we secure the registers and change all codes. For a moment, Brad looked like he might argue, but the evidence surrounded him. The staff watched, some in disbelief, some in quiet tears, most in sheer relief. His power evaporated. This is a mistake, he mumbled. No, Cameron replied. The mistake was mine. For creating a system where someone like you could operate this long without consequences. Marcus stepped forward. Brad left without another word. Cameron turned back to the staff. Their faces reflected a mix of emotion, shock, exhaustion, something like hope. I owe all of you an apology, he said, especially those who were directly harmed. We will audit every schedule and payroll record. Anyone owed wages or benefits will be made whole. Then his eyes found Noel, who had remained silent the entire time. She stood tall, but still, observing. Processing. Ms. Chin, he said. Could you stay behind for a moment? The others filed out. Some patted her on the shoulder. Others looked at her with something new. Respect. When the room was empty, Cameron faced her. I owe you more than an apology, he said. You did what I should have done. You protected someone who couldn't protect herself. You stood up, when silence would have been safer. I just did what needed to be done, Noel replied quietly. You risked your livelihood in the process. She nodded. And I'd do it again. He stepped closer. I'd like to offer you the manager position here. You've more than earned it. To his surprise, she shook her head. No. Cameron blinked. May I ask why? Because I didn't do any of this for a title, she said. I did it for justice. Her voice didn't waver. Elena has a 5-year-old son, she continued. She lost her home, her dignity. What Brad did wasn't just unfair, it was cruel. You want to fix this? Then start by fixing that. Cameron absorbed every word. Then tell me what you want, he asked. Name it. I want Elena reinstated with full back pay, she said without hesitation. I want her record cleared. I want a system in place so this never happens again. Cameron nodded. Done. I'll contact her personally today. They shook hands. As their eyes met, the weight of hierarchy disappeared. She was no longer a barista. He was no longer a CEO. They were two people who understood what it meant to care. One more thing, he added. I don't think Brew and Branch needs you as just a cafe manager. I think we need you in leadership, on a bigger scale. Noel tilted her head, cautious, curious. I want to rebuild this company's employee advocacy from the inside out, Cameron said, and I want you to lead it. Noel paused. Her shoulders lowered slightly, the first visible breath she'd taken all morning. Sounds like justice, she said. 6 months later, the lobby of Brew and Branch headquarters looked very different. Gone were the corporate walls and silent security. In their place, a working cafe bar. Executives took turns pulling espresso. Staff photos from all 37 locations covered the walls. Today was the launch of the new employee advocacy program. As team members trickled in, many paused to greet the woman standing next to Cameron, Noel Chin. Her blazer was clean-cut, her badge now read, Employee Advocacy Consultant. Nervous? Cameron asked. A little, she admitted. adjusting her lapel. "It's a big change." "For the better," he replied. Inside the conference room, regional managers gathered. Cameron stepped up to the podium. "6 months ago," he began, "I realized our company had failed its most valuable asset, our people. I'd been so focused on growth I stopped seeing the cracks." He turned to Noel. "And one person reminded me what Brew and Branch was really about. Community, accountability, humanity." Noel stepped up. Her voice was calm, measured, powerful. "This program isn't revolutionary," she said. "It's just what should have been there all along. Anonymous reporting systems, scheduled transparency, multi-level termination reviews, staff-led councils at every store, and most importantly, human oversight." As she finished, Cameron saw someone in the back raise a hand. Elena Martinez, now a district trainer. She gave him a nod. Outside, the sun cut across the building. Light found the corners that used to hide shadows. Cameron knew they wouldn't get everything right. There would be more Brads, more challenges. But now, the Elenas and Noels of Brew and Branch had a voice. And more importantly, someone was listening. 6 months later, Brew and Branch didn't just look different. It felt different. The corporate headquarters, once cold and clinical, now buzzed with quiet energy and purpose. The glossy reception desk had been replaced by a small cafe bar where executives, yes, even C-suite, took turns pulling espresso shots beside freshly promoted baristas. The old corporate portraits had been taken down. In their place were framed photos from all 37 locations, candid moments, a team laughing over spilled cold brew, a customer hugging their favorite barista, a handwritten card from a regular that simply read, "Thanks for remembering my name." Cameron Ellis stood in the center of it all, a flat white in hand. He watched as employees streamed in, shoulders back, eyes forward. Not just working, but belonging. Next to him stood Noel Chin, dressed in a navy blazer, clipboard in hand. Her badge now read, Employee Advocacy Consultant. She walked with calm authority now, not the silent exhaustion she once carried behind the register. She didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. People leaned in when she spoke, not because they had to, but because they trusted her. Across the lobby, Elena Martinez entered with her son Miguel, now proudly wearing a Brew and Branch baseball cap 2 sizes too big. Elena's new title, District Trainer, was embroidered just below the company logo. She caught Cameron's eye and gave him a nod. He returned it, then knelt down briefly to greet Miguel. "How's school?" Miguel grinned. "I get chocolate milk when I finish my homework." Cameron chuckled. That's the right kind of incentive program. Inside the conference room, a new kind of meeting was about to begin. No more quarterly fluff updates or KPI theater. This was real talk. Anonymous reporting systems that bypassed store-level filtering, HR audits that couldn't be intercepted, employee councils with direct channels to corporate leadership. The reforms were working. Turnover had dropped, applications were up, customer satisfaction was at its highest in years. But what mattered most? Employees, people, felt seen. As the meeting began, Cameron stayed behind for a moment, watching the cafe fill with conversation and laughter. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like the architect of something broken. He felt like a student again, humbled, learning, grateful. Because leadership, he now understood, wasn't about titles or corner offices. It was about presence. It was about knowing when to speak and when to listen. His eyes drifted to a framed photo on the wall. It showed a small filing cabinet in a quiet cafe. The drawer was slightly ajar, and underneath it the caption read, "Some drawers don't hide theft, some hide integrity." He stared at it for a moment longer, then turned to rejoin the others, but something tugged at his thoughts. What happens when another drawer is found? This time, in a warehouse 2 states over, and it's not money inside? Comment if you believe the truth always finds a way. Subscribe for Part 2. The Whisper, in Warehouse 7, coming soon. Justice doesn't clock out.